Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about business planning for your startup. It's going to be a really fun activity. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. We're going to really get that thinking going in your brain, that brainstorming. So we're going to jump right into this. Let's get to it. All right, so my goal for you today is to have a strong plan for the most essential elements of your startup operation in order to feel confident to move forward. So we're going to have a strong understanding of the most important elements that are going to come up throughout our business. We're going to think through everything, and ultimately the goal is that we'll save time in our execution so we can focus on what really matters when we're actually operating. So I want to start off by saying that startups don't make traditional plans. We're not going to make a traditional 15, 20 page business plan like you'd see in school or see in the corporate setting. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. The big thing is that writing a business plan is time consuming. We have so many activities that we need to get to in our startup process, and we don't want to spend too much time doing these fancy plans because at the end of the day, who's actually going to read this plan? It's not something that you typically reference once you've gotten started. It's just really a document that you use to help you understand the different elements of your business and where to focus your time and how to make sure that nothing's slipping under the rug. All right, so no business plan can protect you from the uncertainty there is with running a startup. So, a really important note to make here because when we create business plans for established companies, for example, so let's say we're doing a business plan for a big bank, well, they have a lot of historical data to go off of. They have all kinds of research centers understanding all different parts of the economy, and they can really build out a masterful plan because there is a lot of certainty in their operations. They've already established their frameworks. They're not building anything from scratch. They're really just adding layers to their existing business. So when you have a startup, you're actually in the opposite scenario. You want to take a more lean and adaptable approach. So we want to think about all the different areas just like a big business would do, but when we're actually putting it into action, it's really about being adaptable and resilient to the unexpected things that come up. And hopefully we think about all of these things before they actually do come up so that when they do, we already have a plan, we've already thought about it, and we can not let it get in the way of our operations. So there's tons of uncertainty with running a startup business or starting a business in general. So there's no need to build this complex, detailed, analytical plan. We're going to think in practical terms. All right, so here's the key difference between business planning and making a business plan. So our big goal is that we're going to seek to understand our business and all the moving parts. We don't have an established business to analyze or to pick apart and figure out what we can change. We're really just trying to understand all the elements of our business. And a big thing we're going to do is brainstorm how we're going to address the various challenges that might come up. There's going to be a lot of challenges, going to be a lot of unexpected things that we can't plan for because we are a startup business and we're just learning. We're going to make some mistakes along the way, but hopefully through this planning process, we can really have a good grasp on what our actual business is going to look like, what our goals are, and how we're going to attract customers and have a successful summer. So let's jump right into it here. We're going to break up our business plan into three categories. Number one is the company. So we're going to look at the big picture first. We're going to make a couple notes about that, and then that'll be done. After that, we're going to look at our operations. So we're going to pick that apart into four separate sections within that. We're going to analyze basically what our day-to-day operations are going to look like. We start at looking at it from a higher level, and then we're going to get into the actual substance and details behind our operations. And then lastly, we're going to look into our marketing. So we're going to see it again from a practical approach. We're going to think about how we can attract and manage our customers at the different stages of our business. It's going to vary from when we're first starting up to when we're just getting off the ground to midway through the summer when we want to look at maybe growing and scaling our business. So these are the three things we're going to talk about. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. And I also want to mention that as a little bonus, I did a written document with actually a hypothetical business plan for a hypothetical car cleaning company, Matt's Car Cleaning Company, that I've sort of used as a reference here. So we're not going to go too much in detail with that, but you'll have access to that to review as you're creating your own business plans or you're doing your own planning exercise if you need to stimulate some thoughts and really just understand from my own experiences running a home services business, you can understand what might come up. So start off with company planning here, and this is really simple. One point for each of these. nothing extensive. This is really just so you have this in your mind. So what's your service? What's your main goal? What's the key problem you're looking to solve? And how you're going to solve this problem. So I did an example here for Matt's car cleaning. What's your service? Mobile car cleaning service. What's our main goal? We're going to generate $30,000 of revenue, and we're going to earn over minimum wage after we paid our expenses, after we've done any reinvesting, saving some money over maybe for next year. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're making over minimum wage. Next is, what is the key problem you're looking to solve or address? So customers currently have long wait times when they want the service and experience an inconvenient and expensive process that leaves them feeling unhappy with their purchase. This combines a lot of the statements that we've gone through in the value proposition when we were actually interviewing our customers and seeing what their problems were, or sorry, not our customers, but our hypothetical customers or potential future customers, but we're understanding the problems that they have and what we want to solve. So this sentence combines all of those because customers, they currently have long wait times. We figured out that with car cleaning, a lot of them wanted to get done in the spring, and most companies were jam-packed at that time. So there's long wait times when they want the service. They experience an inconvenient and expensive process. So they go through, they have to drop off their car at a location. They don't get a great, professional service. They don't have the employees that really care too much about them. The technicians actually working on the car don't even know their name. It's expensive. There's a lot of overhead that the company has being at a location, so they have to charge a lot of money. And ultimately, the customer doesn't have any reason to feel good about the purchase. So how are we going to solve this problem? We're going to offer a quick and convenient booking process and deliver a service on time with a satisfaction guarantee. We're going to give next day service, if not, next day, day after that, same week service once we get some bookings. And it's gonna be quick and convenient. We're gonna have a thought out booking process. We're gonna deliver the service on time, and we're gonna make sure that we do it until the customer's happy. We're not gonna leave customers unsatisfied. So we're gonna make sure that if we need to come back, we'll come back. If we need to come back multiple times, we'll do that as well. We're gonna have a satisfaction guarantee with our service. All right, so now let's talk about operations planning. So for this, it's a little more detailed, so I'm going to leave that to the document. We're not going to put all my notes, but I will chat about some notes to hopefully get you thinking. And what I would encourage you to do if you haven't already is pull out your Google Drive or your notepad or anything you want to do to take notes as we go here. Of course, we're always going to give you access to these slides, but you might want to take some notes about what I'm saying as they relate to these questions. So the first thing of operations planning, or the first step here starting here, is think about the higher level. So what's your first day of operation? So what are you actually launching? When do your exams finish? And when it's going to be your first day that you go out and service customers or you go out for sales? Next, what's the maximum number of weeks you can operate? So thinking about the whole summer as a whole, typically the summer is about 18 or 19 weeks. If you're a university student, probably about half that if you're a high school student. And so thinking about what is the maximum number of weeks you can operate and what is the expected number of weeks you can operate. So literally go to your calendar like right now if you can, or just go to your calendar and see exactly how many weeks there are. So there's probably 19 weeks if you're in university again, and there's probably about 10 weeks or 12 weeks if you're in high school. And just look at the weeks and then see what the actual expected number of weeks you can operate. So think about if you want to take vacation time, if you're going to be less busy at certain times, more busy at other times. Think about what your actual time frame is going to look like and map that out. And write again, a note doesn't have to be something that that's extensively planned. You might change that up. And then finally, where will you execute your service? So I assume you're going to be a mobile service, so that'll just be at customers' houses. Something you want to keep in mind with planning your operations. All right, next section here is executing your service. All right, so we're going to think about actually what we're going to do or what goes into actually offering our service that we're doing. So how will we execute the service more generally? What's that going to entail? What supplies and equipment do you expect that you'll absolutely need? So when we start to map out what our process is going to look like, what are some initial supplies and equipment that we know that we're going to need? Supplies, equipment, bucket, maybe a tarp to lay down. Maybe there's that primary cleaning tool like a steam cleaner, or what is that primary tool that we're going to use to clean? What are the different cleaning solutions? So chemicals, things like that. What are some extra things that we need? So some cloths, some garbage bags, things like that. So this is in our business plan document that we share with you. But anyways, thinking about what supplies and equipment you're actually going to need, make some notes about that. Later on in the course here, we're going to talk about actually building out your process. But start to think about what supplies and equipment that you'll need. Then what are some steps of the service execution process? So how's that going to look? It's not just you, showing up and automatically cleaning the car. What are the different elements of that? What do you have to, showing up on location? What do you need from the customer? How are you going to set up so you don't leave any mess behind? How are you going to have what's going to be your system for executing? What are you going to do first? What is the step by step in terms of how you're actually going to go cleaning? And maybe you don't know that yet, and that's perfectly okay. That's where we need to be adaptable. We want to be flexible, but it is a good idea to just generally think about that. And then when we're actually going in practice, we can adjust it as we go. All right. And then how we get the supplies and equipment you need is something you want to factor in. Do you need to order them online? Do you need to go to a local retailer? Is there specific specialty retailers that you can only go to? Do you have a major supplier where you get most of your things from? So if you're a painting business, for example, you're probably going to go to one paint shop. If you're a fencing business, you're probably going to go to one place for lumber and wood and anything that you need for your fencing stuff. So how are you going to get your supplies and equipment? And then how is that going to factor into your operations planning? Because you always want to make sure that you have access to this and it's not deterring you from executing your service. So that might be something you need to plan ahead of time. Maybe there's shortages. Maybe there's, again, if it's only a specialty, one place that offers it, maybe you have to get in bulk. Maybe you have to order online in advance and it takes a couple days or a week to get there. So those are some of the things you want to think about. Next is how long do you think it'll take to complete your service? So what do you expect we want to start thinking about the days here and what going to be your capacity. That's where we're headed at. So how long is it going to take and how long are you willing to spend to execute your service? This is a really important thing to think about because when we actually are planning our operation, especially when we're thinking about our revenue targets, thinking about what we want to do, and thinking if we need a team member, anything like that with us, we want to think about how long it's actually going to take and how long we're actually planning on. What's the maximum basically that we're willing to spend at a customer's house? There's obviously a learning curve when you first get started. You can be a little bit slower, a little bit more attentive to detail, and then as you go along, you'll be able to fast track some things. You'll realize what's not necessary. You'll maybe discover some other supplies, equipment that make you more efficient, things like that. But just generally thinking how long it's going to take is super important. Next is what's your estimated daily capacity. So, if it's going to take you 2 hours to clean a car, how many cars will you be able to clean? You'll have to factor in travel, you have to factor in lunch, you have to factor in time to make sales, things like that. So, what's your estimated daily capacity? What will you do if the weather prevents you from executing the service? It's a huge one for home service companies. You never know what's going to happen with the weather. We might have a spring and summer that's extremely rainy, that still has snow. There's all these things that we want to factor in, and how can we work around that? You don't automatically have to call a rainy day an off day. You might just need to plan out, so maybe you do some of your more behind the scenes activities, your administrative activities on rainy days, and you intentionally don't do them when it's nice out because you want to capitalize on that. So you want to think about the weather because that's going to definitely impact your capacity. All right. What will you do if the weather prevents you from executing your service? So that's another one. You want to really think about how you can use your days wisely. You don't want to be doing activities you could be doing on a rainy day during a nice sunny day. You want to make sure that you're maximizing those days. And this is actually something as another note. You can actually look this up what the average rainfall is within certain areas. So within your area, you can see exactly what the average rainfall was, what was the rainfall last year. They have a lot of historical data that can help you plan your operations and plan your capacity. Something you definitely want to factor in because if you're going to hit your goals and let's say you have a service that's extremely seasonal, it's very busy in the springtime mostly, you want to make sure that you're really maximizing that time and maybe you're working 12, 14-hour days at the start because the rest of the summer you're going to be able to take off or you're going to be able to do on a more part-time basis. Or maybe you just need to get a lot of your sales and set up your service contracts at the beginning of the season. So for example, landscaping businesses, and then after that you'll have steady work throughout the summer. So a lot of things to factor in and think about when you think about your capacity, and there's tools that you can use to actually analyze that, such as looking up the weather and looking up historical data on in that sense. Another thing to think, or the next thing to think about is what are the direct costs of executing your service, and these are what is called the costs of goods sold or cost of sales. So cost of goods sold is the direct costs. You can have other business costs, but the direct costs are actually related to executing the service. So typically that requires this, that means the supplies used for that. It means the labor, so your own wage for executing the service, and then any associated costs such as travel. So if you need to travel to the person's house, the location, these are all direct costs. Some things that wouldn't be direct costs would be, for example, bank fees, websites, other things like that. So there's, we have some other small costs, insurance, some things like that, but that doesn't factor into direct cost of goods sold. Direct cost just means what do you need exactly to execute that service, which is typically supplies, materials, labor, and travel. All right, and then last thing in this section is when would you consider hiring employees? We're not going to talk too much about employees right now because that's something when you first get started, we'd encourage you to go in solo. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know, what your sales level is going to be, what the demand is going to be in your area, and how you're going to execute. And you also don't know how to actually execute your service yet. So it's going to be very difficult for you to hire employees, train them, manage them. It's going to be an extra added stress level, and it's going to reduce the quality of your service and reduce your chances of success off the bat. But it is a good idea to think when you would consider hiring employees. What would be that time in your service or in your cycle that you would consider? If you had a weeks full of bookings, if you had just a lot of demand and a highly satisfied customer base, these are the times that you would think, okay, well, I'm actually ready now to hire some employees, maybe on a part-time basis. Maybe I'll hire my brother or sister. Maybe I'll hire my best friend who works during the day, but he can work in the evenings or on the weekends. There's different options there. I would never think about hiring a full-time legitimate employee right off the bat, but you might want to get some extra help, extra helping hands, which is always not a bad idea if you want to maximize your revenue potential. All right, next thing is building your operation around your customers. We want to bring that back to the customer. So how's a customer going to book your service? We're going to talk more extensively about designing a booking process, but think about what that's going to look like in terms of how they're going to get a quote, how they're going to schedule, how they're going to get a confirmation, what are they going to expect in terms of what you need from them. So do you need any supplies, equipment from them? Do you need any access, access to their home, access to their backyard, access to their vehicle? What do you need from the customer in that booking process? You want to build that all into your booking process. That way you don't have to have a lot of unnecessary communications with the customer and you can provide them with a better experience. Next is how will you have access to the information you need from the customer when you execute the service? So what is it that you need to actually know? Maybe there's specific requirements for your service. Maybe it's more custom and you need to actually work with the customer. For example, let's say you're doing garage cleaning services. You're going to need the customer to be home and you need access, first of all, to their garage. You need to access an understanding of what's junk, what's not, what shelving units and things like that they would potentially consider getting installed. You need to know a lot of information from the customer. So think about it in that sense. And then also think about personal information. What contact information do you need? What do you need to follow up afterwards? Definitely a phone number, an email, their name, maybe their social media accounts. You want to connect with them on LinkedIn or get them to follow your social media pages. There's a lot of things that you might need from your customer. You don't want to make things too mandatory. So you want to think about what is actually specifically relevant to your service offering. All right, so what is needed from the customer in order to execute your service? So again, what access do you need? What sort of things around the home? What do you need? Do you need access to their hose? Do they need to make sure that that's on? In the springtime, in the winter, we often turn off our hoses, disconnect the water. So do you need them to connect the water? Do you need access to electricity, a power outlet? Do you need access to an extension cord? So these are the things that you want to think about what you actually need from the customer to execute your service. And again, the more you can think about those things, the more you can actually have a better chance of giving the customer the convenience and the great experience that you've promised them. And they might even be blown away that you're a startup and you've already thought of all these things that you need from them. They give you all their information once. It's just a quick, seamless booking process. It's all thought out. It's all systematic. And then after that, they have their service completed and they're happy. All right, and then what does the customer need to know from you? What do they need to know about your service? Maybe after you've completed your service, there's some post-service. Maybe they need to wait 24 hours before using the appliance. Maybe they need to, maybe there's additional work. Maybe you need to come back at a certain time to inspect. Maybe there's products that they need to keep, if they're doing a cleaning service, maybe you want to help them keep that appliance or keep that part of their home clean. So maybe there's some things there. So what does the customer need to know? How will this information be communicated to them? So if it's something you can communicate all in one shot in your sales interaction, great. But maybe it's not. Maybe you need to have continual communication. So you need to establish this with the customer, and they're going to want to know how they can expect to be communicated with. So can they expect a call on the day of? Can they expect a text? Maybe email has all the information. How will this information be communicated to them? Then how are you going to collect payment from the customer? How are they going to actually pay you for the service? Are they going to leave it behind? Maybe they leave a check or cash behind. Are you going to accept credit card? Are you going to accept e-transfer? How can they get confirmation of payment? How, when they do pay, how can they get a receipt afterwards to indicate that they paid? Maybe you want to send them an invoice beforehand so they can pay on their own. Maybe you want to call them. Maybe you want to go to them directly. So how can you collect payment from your customer? All right, and then how will you handle an unsatisfied customer? What happens if you do the service and the customer's unhappy? They did not expect that, and they expected something else, and they're really unhappy. How are you going to handle that? It's easy to say, I'll just give you your money back, you won't have to pay, but that's something that's not exactly sustainable for your business, especially when you've worked 4, 5, 6 hours. Dealing with unsatisfied customers is a reality of your business. If you think of it in this sense, when you talk to 100 people, you have 100 people in any scenario. There's always going to be those, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that are going to be, uncooperative or difficult to deal with. And this is the reality with your customers when you're doing this kind of volume, especially customers who are paying for premium services, paying for these convenient services. They are going to have some expectations. Most of them are probably going to be, understanding that you're a student, but not everyone's understanding. Not everyone has the compassion, has emotional intelligence. So you'll pretty quickly understand that there is a need to think about unsatisfied customers and actually plan for unsatisfied customers. How are you going to remedy the situation so well that this unsatisfied customer is blown away? They're actually happy. They turn into your best customer. The amount of times that this happened for me in my business was incredible. Some of our best 5-star reviews, some of our highest praisers, people who talked about us to all their friends, their family, and their network were people who originally were unsatisfied customers with their service, but they were just so blown away with how we handled the situation that it was actually an opportunity. So an unsatisfied customer, I always say, is a great opportunity for you to take advantage of. There is inherently unreasonable people, Karens as we refer to them, but and I apologize if your name's Karen, but Karens, as we commonly refer to them, there is certain people like that. We do want to plan for that. We want to make sure that we minimize the damage and the impact on our business and maximize the upside potential of it if there is any. All right, the last part of operations planning is your other day-to-day activities. So these are things that aren't directly related to your service execution or directly related to your revenue generation. These are activities that you want to think about because you want to plan so that they're done in non-optimal times, on weekends, on times that you're not actually doing your service, so on rainy days, things like that. The last thing you want to do is have a daily routine of doing a lot of these activities because it's really energy consuming, it's time consuming, and don't directly impact the bottom line of your business. So a couple of these activities are: how will you record expenses when you make purchases? So, for me, easy strategy right away: when you make a purchase, take a picture of the receipt. If it's a digital receipt, you download that, put it right on your Google Drive right away. That's why we designed a Google Drive for you and some folders to keep you organized. You want to record your expenses, and then we've also put together a template. We're going to go through that soon. Put together a template to actually record your expenses automatically. It's very simple, straightforward, and it's an awesome tool. So how are you going to record your expenses when you make purchases? How will you keep track of your invoices and receipts? This is huge. You have to keep track of this because at the end of the season, you're going to have to reconcile all your revenue, or even not end of season, but monthly, weekly. You're going to reconcile all your revenue. Make sure that you've gotten paid in the proper amounts. Make sure that your revenue matches, your customers, and your receipts and invoices. These are source documents. They're very important to track, very important to take care of. So how are you going to track these? And if they're going to be paper, if they're going to be written on paper, how are you going to make sure you don't lose those? How are you going to have a system? Are you going to have a box in your car, receipt box, invoice box? Are you going to have something in your house, in your room? Are you going to have a storage facility for this? Next is, how will you make sure that you pay your bills on time? There's going to be bills that come up. There's going to be different expenses, maybe insurance expense that might be monthly, different bills. And how are you going to make sure that you actually are paying these and you're not wasting too much time in the process, and you're verifying that it's the right amount, that you're not being overcharged, not being charged the wrong amount. So how do you make sure you pay your bills on time? Your credit card bills, if you get a business credit card, how do you make sure that you pay that on time? And lastly, how are you going to stay organized overall? How are you going to make sure that all your files, all your documents, all your systems, customer information, all your data, everything stays organized, how you want to make sure that this doesn't get out of control when you're actually in the thick of things. Because when you're operating, when you're in the day to day, you're not going to have a lot of time to build new systems or think about that, because you're going to be focused on operations. Right now, we're in that stage of planning and thinking about these things, because remember, the reason we're doing this is really because we want to think this stuff out now, plan this stuff out now, so when we're actually operating, we're just focused on what we need to be focused to make our business successful. So how are you going to stay organized? All right, so that's it for operations planning. We're going to move on to marketing planning now. If you need to pause, you need to reflect a bit, maybe rewind this video, think back a little bit, use the document that we provided as a template. These are really important activities to think about. Throughout the program, throughout the course, we're actually going to get into these a little bit more. Some of these key activities like design your booking process, creating your service execution process. So that's not the end of that. We just want to start thinking about it. We want to start making some dot jots, some general notes. We don't need to over dwell on these things, but we do need to start thinking about these at this point in time before we get to the next stages of our business. All right, so now let's talk about marketing planning. So marketing planning, we're going to start with starting up here. And marketing planning is going to be something that's different from each stage of the business. So when we talk about starting up, we want to talk about the higher level things, and then we're going to talk about getting our first customers, and then we're going to talk about scaling after that. So some questions we want to ask is, where are my headquarters? So if it's at your parents' house, have they approved of this? This might be the right time to actually ask your parents if you can use their garage, if you can use your room as the business headquarters for your company. They're probably going to say yes, but you actually want to, if you ask and you actually get permission for it, it goes a long way, and it makes them really respect you, and it shows that you're respecting their house and their rules. All right, and what do you customers? So next thing is, what do your competitors charge for your service? So we did some preliminary competitor research, early on, got an understanding when we were figuring out what service we wanted to offer. So now let's maybe look back to that. Maybe we made some notes, maybe we didn't. So let's look back at our main competitors. Who were our main, top, even just like our top competitor? Who was the big shot in this industry that we're trying to take down with our service, trying to innovate and try to do something different from? So what do they charge for the service? What do some other people charge for the service? Get an idea of what the general pricing is. And maybe in this process, when you're looking at what your competitors charge, you might find that there's different tiers within the industry, different niches. So you might find that there is the lower end, then there is the upper end, and we want to figure out, where are we going to fit into that? So what are different competitors charge? And then what are we hoping to charge for the service? What's going to be our pricing strategy? When we first start out, we want to really think about, what is the lowest that we're willing to go in order to get our business off the ground and in order to get our first couple of customers. We don't want to undercut ourselves too much, but we do want to price in the value that we're providing in terms of our experience level. So how good we are at the service, what they can expect. If we're already really great at the service, we'll feel confident in that, then we can come in with a solid price, like a price that we've really built out for the longer term. Maybe we don't want to adjust our pricing at all, but we do want to stay flexible, and that's why we don't go too hard in planning our financials and things like that. We are going to do that, but we're not going to be too stringent on that, because we know that our pricing will change, be flexible, and it's different customers might want discounts in order to get booked, and we might cave in on that. So we want to continually be busy and fill our schedule. We might do more bundled deals than we expect. We might get more friends and family discounts, things like that. So what do we generally hope to charge for our service? Like, what will be our advertised price? And what will be like that go-to price when we first start? What's the lowest we can offer? And then where's that pricing going to look after that? And then next is, when are our customers likely to need this service the most? So if we want to think about actually the dynamics of our service, like, when is the busy time? Like, when is the go-to for customers? A lot of home services, it's in the springtime when customers are first, snow is melted. We first started, seeing our home again, which it's gotten all dirty from the winter. It's, all of our chores have kind of stacked up over the winter, and a lot of us do our spring chores or a lot of our house-related chores in the springtime. That's when a lot of our home services flourish in that time, get really busy. So we want to think about when our customers are likely to need this service the most. This will tell us, if you, for example, let's say you want to start a pool opening and pool cleaning business. Well, you're not going to start a pool opening business in July, because pools are already open by then. So you want to think about when the actual service is needed, when it's going to be the most in demand. If we need to do a little bit of research, maybe we need to go back to our competitor research. We need to call more of our competitors and ask them when their busy season is. Don't be shy with that, or you're just sending them an email using their website chat bot, all those kinds of things. So we want to figure out when our customers are going to likely need the service, and ultimately that's going to dictate how much effort we put in at the certain time. So if we know that there's a small window of opportunity, so in April, May, June, it's going to be our busy times. Maybe we're going to be willing to work that much harder and attract that many more customers in that time to hit our goals, and then after that we can sort of coast through the summer, enjoy the summer. I know this was the case for me. If I'm going to bring my own story back into it with barbecue cleaning services, it was hella busy in the springtime. That was our really busy time. We would always get, at the start, customers would be very easy to obtain in terms of, people actually, if we hit the right target market, we did the right things, they would be relatively easy to obtain. And as we went throughout the summer, people would already have opened their barbecue. They're already using it, and they wouldn't see the need to invest in a full professional cleaning service because it just was already in use. They didn't really feel the need. But in the springtime, when they first opened it up, they saw a mouse in there. They saw rodent droppings in the bottom. They knew that there was a need for the service. So think about when your customers are going to need the service the most. And lastly here, when we're planning our startup, is how often do customers need my service? So how often? What's the frequency? Is it something that's annually? Is it semi-annually? Is it monthly? Is it recurring? Is it weekly? Is it, landscaping is great because you get one customer and you get them back weekly for grass cutting, different things like that. Or is it more of a one-time service? Is it less than annually? Maybe it's something they just need every couple of years. So I want to think about that and think about how often that customers can actually need the service. Maybe do some brainstorming there, maybe make some notes. Now we talk about attracting our first customers. This is when we're first getting off the ground in the early stages. And again, we're going to support you with this, but this is going to be just thinking about these stages. So where are the closest potential customers to your headquarters? So to your house, do you live in a good neighborhood? Is it the ideal market for your service? Who do you know that might be interested in becoming a customer? So who's in your personal network? Maybe asking your parents first, then your parents' friends, your friends' parents. Using your personal network to attract your first set of customers is typically what we do. And after that, we want to think about who do they have in their network? How can we expand organically from there? It's the easiest thing to do to use word of mouth, and it's going to be the lowest cost, and it's going to help us get off the ground. These are going to be the customers that help us out at the beginning. All right, what is the first thing you will do if you do not have any customers on day one? So that was the case for me, didn't have a single customer on day one. So what's gonna be your first move? We're gonna talk about that. And the first move is ultimately going to be going door to door, knocking on doors in the right neighborhoods with the right pitch, the right time, right place. So we're gonna talk about strategies there. But we want to think, what does that day one look like? Customers are not going to magically appear. We got to go out and get the customers. We got to find them where they are. We're going to go to their location, and we got to hustle to get their business. All right, how do we convince someone to be a customer? So this is where we talk about our sales pitch. We got to start thinking about how are we going to communicate the value proposition that we've developed, and how are we going to provide enough of a selling point that's actually going to convert someone who might be interested into actually being a customer. It's easy to present our business in front of people, but how are we going to convert them to actually making the decision to buy our service? No one likes to make dumb decisions. It has to be a smart decision for them. It has to make sense for them. So how are we going to make it make sense? What do your customers need from you in order to make a purchase decision? So what materials will you need? Will you need a business card? Will you need a flyer that outlines some information? Are you going to need a website up that's going to show some information and give you some credibility? So what do customers need to actually make the purchase decision? Again, it might be something that someone's interested in, but there's a big difference between interest and actually becoming a customer. So what are they going to need to actually convert to being a customer? At the starting point, they're probably going to need a lot of information just from us. We're going to have to sell ourselves. We're going to have to convince them that we're credible and that we're hardworking, we're students, we're willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, and we put thought into our process, we know what we're doing. So what are the customers going to need from us to make the decision? What are some free ways that we can attract customers? That's going to be our first focus. We don't want to pay to attract customers at the beginning. We want to go out there and attract them directly. So we want to knock on their door. That's going to be the best free way to attract customers. The other free way to attract customers is using our personal network. So asking our parents, friends, family friends, cousins, relatives, anyone in our own network. And then after that, what are some practical low-cost ways to attracting customers? So again, we're going to talk more about this, but start thinking about what are some ways that you're going to attract customers outside of just knocking on doors. You want to have some customers ideally coming into you. You won't have everyone answer their doors. So how are you going to, when you're in a neighborhood, how are you going to make sure that your presence is felt even if you don't talk to everyone? So you're going to have flyers with you. Are you going to have business cards? You're going to have lawn signs. You have things that can attract customers without you talking directly. So what are some low-cost ways you can do that? And how can you maximize what you have available to you, what resources you have as a new startup entrepreneur? So think about our network. Think about how you can use us. How can we help you? All right, so number 3 is achieving goals. So what are the most efficient and cost-effective sales funnels for my business. So this is after you've launched. We're thinking about now achieving that revenue goal. So my revenue goal is $30,000 for the summer. So how am I going to actually achieve this goal in the most cost-effective way and the most efficient way? So we want to factor in our time. So how much time does it take when we knock on doors, for example? How much time on average does it take to execute a sale? Can that time be used elsewhere? So if we weren't doing door-to-door sales at that time, would we be able to increase our revenue by doing operations? Would we be able to clean cars for later on in the night if we didn't need to go out and knock on doors for sales? The other thing you want to factor in is cost. So what is the cost of our sales efforts? So when we think about our time, what's our time worth? And your time's not worth anything if you're not actually working. So don't think about it as, oh, I'm worth this much and my time is worth. I want to relax and do other things. Hang out with friends and things like that. Your time's not worth that. Your time's worth nothing when you're not working. So it's really just, can you be working? Can you actually be executing the job? Can you be cleaning an extra car that day instead of doing a sale? And if the cost makes sense there, you can then consider paid advertising. You can think about what other mechanisms we can do to acquire new customers other than just knocking on doors. Then we want to think about availability of alternatives. So how much time is going to go into each alternative? Later on in this course, we're going to talk about building digital ads. So we're going to go through the process of building Google ads. We're going to go through the process of building Facebook ads, go through the whole thing. So we want to look at alternatives that we have. What's available and how much time, cost, investment, resources takes to try out those alternatives, to use those alternatives. You want to think about all these sales funnels. What are the effective sales funnels? These are things that we just want to think about right now because we're not going to think in this sense when we're first starting up. These are just things that we want to think about actually achieving our goals so we can feel confident that we're on the right path. How can we maximize revenue per customer? The rule of thumb is that 75% of your revenue comes from 25% of your customers. A loyal customer, what that basically means is that a loyal customer is worth more to your business than anyone else, essentially. So how can we use our best customers at the start to maximize the revenue? So there's a couple ways we can maximize revenue. We can add additional services, we can add products, or we can add bundle deals and use this customer as a salesperson for our business. So use their network of referrals and leads to attract more customers to our business. So how can we use a customer that we've already built a relationship with? We've done the hardest part, establishing that connection. How can we then use that customer to maximize revenue? And really that means maximizing value. So how can we provide the most value for this customer? And how can we extract the most value from the time we've invested into building this relationship? How will you establish social proof for your business? So how are you going to make sure that all your happy customers are actually referring you to their friends, or you're getting referrals from them? You're asking them specifically for potential customers. You're using their neighbors. How are you going to get reviews from them? How are you going to get them to leave you online reviews? Everyone's busy. It's tough to get online reviews. So through this program, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about establishing social proof for your business, but think about this ahead of time. How are you going to convince people or make it as easy as possible for people to leave you an online review? You might think it's easy, but think about the last time you left an online review. What compelled you to actually do that? Was it that they made it really easy? Was it that there was a promotional offer? What was the strategy? What compelled you? And typically what compels people, unfortunately, is when they have a bad experience. They have a really bad experience. They really hate this business. They hate this person that they did business with. So they're like, I'm going to leave a bad review. I'm going to really make my voice heard. So how can we take that same emotion, that same drive to leave a review, but in the positive sense? How can we make someone so happy with the service that they got from us that they're going to actually leave a 5-star review for our business? And lastly, what's the maximum cost you want to pay to acquire a customer? So this is the cost of acquisition. So when we think about cost of acquisition, we want to factor in all of our other costs. We want to factor our revenue goals, our profit goals, what the cost of actually executing our service is, so our cost of goods sold that we just talked about. What are our other expenses in running our business? What's going to be the profit that we need to reinvest for next year? We want to factor all those things in when we think about what is the most we're willing to pay for a customer. We don't want to just look at it as black and white. If a customer pays us $200, we're willing to pay anything under $200 to get that customer because it's not going to be worth it for our business. We got other costs. So what's going to be the maximum cost that we're willing to pay to acquire a customer? All right, so we've gone through all the questions. You have access to that document that I've chatted about. We have some notes made on there. We have some ideas. Remember with this planning process that we're planning really now to save the time in execution later. So really seeing it as a practical element of the building process for our business is really important here. We don't want to invest too much time. This shouldn't be an activity that takes us weeks, or even like less than it should take. It should take us less than 10 hours to do this. Even less than that. I think that's even a lot. But we're using this activity now to save time in execution later. That should be the primary goal. Anything that's not saving us time in our execution or saving us money in our execution, we shouldn't be worrying about. So that's why we've designed these questions to get us thinking, because we want to bring it into our goals. We want to think about the top line, so the revenue. We want to think about the cost. We want to think about all the little parts that go into executing our service and building our business. All right, so we are planning now to save time and execution later. That should be the primary driver. Don't worry about building a fancy plan. You're going to see my example. That's exactly what you should build. It's dot form, just simple, practical answers, and we don't go any further than that. All right, so I'm going to end off with a quote here. This is one of my favorite quotes. Came from Winston Churchill. He's a former British Prime Minister. Is that plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. So you don't need to make this plan pretty. You don't need to make it fancy. You don't need to make it sound good. What you need to do is plan the different elements, be prepared, save time for later on, and really just thinking everything out. That's really what this quote means. Winston Churchill was a prime minister, a British prime minister in a wartime, and he knew better than anyone that when you're in action, you're really being adaptable, you're executing, you're changing your plans all the time, you're factoring different things in as unexpected things come up, you're adapting and changing, you're being resilient. All those sorts of things you got to be ready for. So you got to be ready for execution, but the planning is a really important part because we want to understand all the different areas of our business that could come up. So I hope this planning activity was helpful. Feel free to use the resource that we provide. Feel free to message the network. Remember, we're all planning our business. We're doing it in different stages, doing it at the same time, doing it in similar industries. We're all in the same process. So message the network if you have any questions with your business planning process. If you have any other things that you want to include, by all means, definitely do. Maybe we can chat about it. Feel free to reach out to me. You might have some other ideas that you want to do with your business planning. Maybe you do want to make a formal business plan because you want to show your parents, you want to show your friends and family. That's okay. By all means, do that. But this is going to be something that's important just to think about your planning process and your activities. So get to it. Get to your business plans. We're going to talk about financials after this. We're going to move forward from there. So thanks a lot for listening, and get to it. Crush it with your business plans.